I always thought those shadow bugs were just a bunch of fucking nonsense, you know? But living out here on my farm, strange things started happening. Small shadowy figures, like bugs, would come alive in the light. Thought it was just my imagination until I started testing it in the barn with the pigs. You see, I drew these shadow bugs with light and turned it off suddenly. When I flipped the light back on, there'd be nothing left of the poor pig but blood and bones. These bugs seem to thrive in darkness and multiply when given a feast. And believe it or not, they have a liking for humans. I've seen remains of folks around town, totally consumed by these tiny razor-sharp critters. The key to survival is keeping a light on at all times. That's why I've got multiple generators on standby. Power outage? No problem. I remember one stormy evening when the power went out and screams echoed from my neighbor's ranch. Found her in a gruesome mess, a stark reminder of the danger lurking in the dark. Let me tell you, I've got it all figured out. Always prepared, always vigilant. That's what they all say. Until one day they're fed to the fucking pigs. I think I have a shadow bug in my head. Trying these little experiments got out of hand. It's not me, though. Then who is it? Who am I talking to? You can hear me. They already heard too much. Did you know that shadow bugs and human flesh make for great fertilizer? That's why my cornfields come alive at night. From death comes life, right? I wasn't always like this. What the fuck happened to me, man? I paced nervously in the dimly lit barn, my lantern casting erratic shadows on the rough, blood-red walls. The line between curiosity and inhumane evil blurred, and I found myself delving deeper into the sinister world I had uncovered. The urge to understand the origin of these shadow bugs had morphed into a perverse fascination, a dark journey that took me to unspeakable depths. As my experiments continued, I became careless with the lives I held in my hands. The thirst for knowledge clashed with a growing guilt, but it was a battle I was willing to ignore. I lured unsuspecting wanderers into my barn, their faces etched with fear as they realized the near fate that awaited them. One by one, I subjected them to the ghastly dance of light and darkness. The tortured screams of those who fell victim to my experiments echoed in my mind, but I pushed aside the guilt, convincing myself that I was serving a higher purpose. A twisted justification fueled by the belief that I was unlocking the secrets of these shadow bugs and the unholy alliance they formed with human flesh. The barn became a grotesque shack of tormented suffering and death, with me playing the role of a mad scientist intoxicated by the revelations. The human experiments escalated, each one more horrifying than the last. I reveled in the power I held over life and death, dismissing the morality that should have anchored my actions. Late one night, after subjecting another helpless soul to the merciless pit of these carnivorous shadow bugs, I found myself torn between the haunting guilt and the compelling thirst for answers. The barn walls seemed to close in on me as the weight of my actions pressed heavily on my shoulders. The line between self-preservation and madness blurred further. In my pursuit of understanding, I began to question the nature of the shadow bugs themselves. What if they weren't just mindless predators, but something more? The unsettling possibility that they were a sentient force, influencing my every bad thought, lingered in the air like a foul stench, yet I pressed on, desperate to uncover the truth that eluded me. The barn became a breeding ground for both horror and psychotic fascination. I conducted experiments on myself, willingly succumbing to the dance of shadows. In the middle of the darkness, I felt a dark, intimidating presence, a force guiding my actions. It spoke to me in my head, making me believe I was the one in control. It grew stronger day by day, and night by night it guided me with specific and grisly instructions on what to do with the pleading victims I held vulnerable and powerless. It seemed the shadow bugs carried a calculated demonic intellect. Or were they controlled by something of a higher influence? As my mind was transforming into God knows what, I was driven by a reckless determination to confront the source of the horror. I subjected myself to an experiment unlike any before. The shadows surrounded and contorted around me, an antagonizing force taking hold. No longer in control, I braced myself for the worst and switched the lights off. At that point, I was expecting a rush of these flesh-eating vermin, but it was too late for me to comprehend what just happened. The shadow bugs had infiltrated my very being, completely merging with my consciousness. I went from puppeteer to puppet, a vessel for the darkness that had consumed me. In a sick fucking twist of fate, the one who believed he held dominion over life and death was all along an unknown servant to the shadowbug's plan. As I collapsed to the floor of the barn, the shadowbugs chirped their final secrets. Once an innocent, hard-working farmer turned crazy serial killer, I was now completely transformed into a host for these multiplying bugs, and had become the embodiment of the horror I had unleashed. As I lay there in the barn, I began violently coughing uncontrollably. Shadowbugs spraying everywhere from my mouth, hitting the ground, breaking off into more. This time, they wore red-colored eyes like specks of blood from my insides, and had evolved with bigger and sharper razor-sharp teeth, hungry and ready to shred their next meal. Sleep tight, and don't let the bedbugs bite.